Hi, I'm Adam Summer. You're listening to the Yerushalmi Talk podcast with the support of the Yeshivat Devar Yerushalayim in Har Nof, Jerusalem. This is Berechot, Chapter 3, Halacha 5, Part 2. And yesterday we left off talking about the amazing holiness of the Torah scroll, and that if you had a Torah scroll sitting on a bench, you would not be allowed to sit on the bench, and that you have to elevate the Torah scroll so you're not at the same level as the Torah scroll. And basically the Gemara now is going to ask, until where should this second object reach? In other words, how high should it be? This is talking about a case where the Torah scroll is placed upon another object that is lying on a bench. And then once you put this other object on the bench and then you put the Torah scroll on top of it, then you can sit on top of the bench. And they're asking, this second intermediary object that goes between the bench and the Torah scroll, how high should it be? And the Gemara is going to give two opinions for it. Rabbi Abba said in the name of Rabbi Huna, it must be a tefach high. A tefach, if you hold your fist, you clench your fist, and you look at the length of the fist from the bottom to the top, that's basically a tefach, more or less. There's going to be some difference depending on how big a person is, but I've seen people that their hands are so big that they can hold a basketball with one hand. So in the temple, when you have measurements, you have there's two sticks for measuring. There's a small one and a big one. And I want to point out that everywhere in the Shas, there's going to be two measurement systems in the Shas. So when you're looking at astronomy in the Shas, that there's implicit in there's going to be two systems of measurement. There's going to be a system of measurement that's going to be for simple people to figure out, and it's going to be less exact. And then there's going to be a super, super precise but very complicated system of measurement. Now, anytime, and I promise you, when you look at it carefully, anytime somebody who is a quote-unquote Bible critic comes and talks about the inaccuracy of the Gemara, which the Gemara is the most accurate that's possible, they're always going to be criticizing the one that is for the simple and unlearned people as a quick measurement system, because the quick measurement system is there in a way to give the simple person an approximation that they can do easily. And then the critic will come and say, you see, your Gemara is not accurate. But what they won't do is they won't go to the other system, the system that's complicated, and do that one, because that one will be down extremely precise. I mean, extremely precise. So that's something that you should take note of, is that there's always underlying all of this, there's always two measurement systems, and you always had in the Torah, in the time of the temple, there was two measuring sticks. So anyway, Rabbi Abba says in the name of Rabbi Huna, it must be a tefach high, and Rabbi Yirmiyah said in the name of Rabbi Zera, even an object of any height whatsoever. One more point about the two sticks. The point about the two sticks was also to make sure there's no meila in the purchasing by the contractors by the temple. So there's another reason why that is. So the Gemara is gonna talk about a tefach, and that less than a tefach would be sufficient according to the Beit Yosef in Yoradea, and that the Beit Yosef is saying that one should not sit on a bench with a Torah scroll unless the scroll rests upon an object that measures 10 tefach or 10 tefachim, or at least 3 tefachim in height. And the Shach explains that this is simply a matter of piety, but under the letter of the law, the object need measure only a tefach, and certainly the other opinion in here would be even an object of any height whatsoever. Anyway, that's what the halacha is going to be a tefach, but more than that is going to be an act of piety according to the Shach. The Gemara is going to cite a baraisa concerning the proper treatment of sacred scrolls, and it's going to say, with regard to transporting a sack that is filled with sacred scrolls, or one that contains the bones of a human corpse, this is the rule. One slings them behind him onto the donkey, and he rides off, and this in no way dishonors the scrolls. Pnei Moshe says about this that although this places the person's back toward the scrolls, which could be deemed disrespectful, it is permitted since otherwise it would be too difficult to transport the scrolls. So what we can see from this baraisa, it's clear that the saddlebags have to be placed behind the person, and it's forbidden to place the bags beneath the saddle and ride on top of them, because that would dishonor the scrolls or the bones. So I want to point out that the Rashi in the parallel in Bavli 18b points out that if there is a danger and he has to ride away quickly, perhaps there's bandits or something like that, then he may ride even with the bags beneath them. Why would that be? Because the Torah is a thing of life, and you have to preserve life, so that you're not supposed to turn the Torah, God forbid, into an idol. And that if you had a case here where you couldn't get away on your horse because you couldn't sit on them, you'd effectively be turning it into an idol, God forbid. So your life really matters, and the way of the Torah is to follow the Torah. And in the Torah, it talks about the infinite value of human life, and that human life has unimaginable meaning and worth, and should not be degraded. And that if you're in danger, you should even sit on the saddlebags and ride off. But that's only in the case that you're in severe danger. The Gemara now is going to talk about the correct method to store tefillin. And it says that one may suspend tefillin from the head of the bed, but one may not suspend them from the foot of the bed. And Gemara is going to talk about the practice of Rebbe. And Rabbi Shmuel quoted Rabbi Abahu, quoted Rabbi Elazar, who said in the name of Rabbi Hanina, Rebbe would suspend his tefillin at the head of the bed. And the Gemara would qualify this permit and say, Rabbi Hiskia says in the name of Rabbi Abahu, and provides that one does not do with the tefillin as one does with this hanging basket, which is typically suspended from above the ropes. Rather, the tefillin themselves, the boxes, are placed above and the straps hang below. So, there's not enough respect, in my opinion, for tefillin in today's day, where you see a degradation and a thing of, things being brought down. In Havdalah, we talk about the separation between Am Yisrael and the nations, and between the mundane and the holy. Tefillin are holy. This is holy. And today we see not enough care or respect for things that are holy. And we see all sorts of, as the world becomes more secular, we see more degradation and confusement about it. We see these, horrible women at the wall who are sitting there wearing, short sleeves and wearing tefillin, and going and yelling at religious women that they should have the right to sit at the wall in immodest clothes while wearing tefillin. This is so mixed up, and you have no idea the value of tefillin. This is something that has so much meaning because it connects you directly with prayer and a Kodesh Baruch Hu, and something with this deep connection and love of a Kodesh Baruch Hu. And this is a commandment that is so precious. They had an earthquake, and it was in Iraq, where one of the prophets has a tomb there. Ezekiel has a tomb there, and there was an earthquake, and a lot of the area got destroyed, and they went there to redo it. And what did they find? Right under Ezekiel's head, where the skeleton is, they found the tefillin right there. And what are the tefillin? It matches Rashi exactly. So this is an ancient thing that goes all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu. And, there's so much richness with tefillin that, every day when you put on your tefillin, you have to try to manifest, to put a lot of spiritual strength into trying to connect with the mitzvah of tefillin, because these are spiritual antenna that are going to connect you with the creator of the universe, and is a mitzvah for just a Jew. And so the Gemara is going to talk about suspending tefillin from part of the bed that is near one's feet. That would be something that would dishonor a sacred object. Now, the Gemara is going to talk about the practice of Rebbe, and the Gemara says that Rabbi Shmuel quoted Rabbi Abahu, quoted Rabbi Elazar, who said in the name of Rabbi Hanina, Rebbe would suspend his tefillin at the head of the bed. And the point is Rabbi Hanina's testimony is cited in the Bavli. However, no mention is made there of the bed, and Rashi writes that Rebbe hung the tefillin from a peg. So that's a key point there, that do not mistake it that Rebbe would disrespect such a precious object, that this is a thing that is written in shorthand, and the clarification is that there was another way that had it. Now, the Haredim says about this that let me do the Gemara. Gemara qualifies a permit. Rabbi Hiskiah says in the name of Rabbi Bahu, provided that one does not do with the tefillin as one does with hanging a basket, which is typically suspended from above with the ropes. Rather, the tefillin themselves, the boxes are placed above and the straps hang below. So this basket, says the Haredim, is suspended by ropes from a nail or a peg, and items are then placed in the basket. And the Gemara rules that one may not suspend tefillin in this manner from the straps with the boxes dangling below, and that dishonors the tefillin. Rather, one must place the boxes onto the peg, or in our case, onto the headboard of the bed, and leave the straps dangling below. The Mara Fulda says about this the following: says that when a merchant conducts business and hangs his chains from pegs without taking care to hang them right side up, and the Gemara, because it's using a phrasing here that is very particular to a type of person who sells chains, like a jeweler who sells chains. That word is daya kalara. Daya kalara. So the idea here, because there's going to be some people who will amend that text. The Rosh Cirilio does, by the way, and he's going to amend it to say to change the word to the word ki, which is dak liyada. Okay, so he's changing it to a dalid, and that's going to be where it's commonly strung onto a cord and hung from a nail. And the Gemara states that one may not suspend tefillin in that kind of manner. So Gemara is going to continue, and it's going to talk about one ruling that was supported by Rabbi Hanina's report of Rebbe's practice. And now the Gemara is going to talk about another one. And the Gemara says that it was taught in a Baraisa. Rabbi Halafta ben Shaul says, one who sneezes during his prayer, during Shemona Esrei, it is an evil omen for him. And the Gemara explains that the Bryce's ruling that which you state, that sneezing during prayer is an evil omen, refers to a sneeze from below. That's going to be passing intestinal gas. But a sneeze from above, from the nose, is not an evil omen. And in support of this explanation, the Gemara cites Rabbi Hanina's report of Rebbe's practice, and this accords with Rabbi Hanina's report concerning Rebbe's behavior during prayer. For Rabbi Hanina said, I saw Rebbe yawn and sneeze during prayer, and when he would yawn, he would place his hand upon his mouth, and he would not spit during prayer. In other words, that basically he would conceal his mouth, and that it's not respectful to pray when one's mouth is gaping wide open. This would even be for somebody who, by the way, says the Rosh, even when somebody prays alone and the action goes unobserved, you don't do it. And that in the Mishnah Beur in 97.1 says that somebody who sneezes during prayer is obligated to cover his open mouth. So, from Rabbi Hanina's testimony, we can see that Rebbe sometimes sneezed during prayer. So clearly a sneeze is not going to be an evil omen if it's from your nose. So Rabbi Hanina reported that Rebbe would not spit while praying, and the Gemara is going to cite a dissenting view. And again, yesterday we were talking about where somebody would spit on some phlegm onto excrement. So Rabbi Hanina reported that Rebbe would not spit while praying. Here's the dissent. Rabbi Yochanan said one may even spit during prayer so that his mouth will be clean when he prays. One is forbidden to spit toward his front, but one is permitted to spit toward his rear, and one is forbidden to spit toward his right, but one is permitted to spit toward his left. And this, the greater importance of the right side, is seen in that which is written, 1,000 may fall on the left side and a myriad at your right. And the Gemara presents a case in which Rabbi Yochanan agrees that it is forbidden to spit during prayer. And all, that's going to be both Rabbi Hanina and Rabbi Yochanan, agree with regard to one who spits in an idle manner that it is forbidden. So, Rosh Cirilio says about this that even Rabbi Yochanan agrees that it is forbidden to spit idly during Shemona Esrei, and spitting during prayer is permitted only if the saliva in the mouth interferes with the prayer. So, having discussed spitting, now the Gemara is going to talk about the law of spitting in a synagogue. And Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, anyone who spits in a synagogue is as if he spits in the pupil of Hashem's eye. This is the words by Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, and Rabbeinu Yonah says that this refers to a person who spits in a synagogue while not engaged in prayer, and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi holds that this is prohibited. In the Bavli, in 62b, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is quoted as saying that with regard to spitting in the Holy Temple, this is the case. So clarification on the Bavli will say that it's in the Holy Temple, and here it's talking about it being in a synagogue. So a little bit of difference between Bavli and Yerushalmi. So there's going to be a dissenting view. Rabbi Yonah would spit on the floor of the synagogue and rub away the saliva with his foot to remove all the traces of it. And according to Rabbi Yonah, it is permissible to spit in a synagogue. Gemara is going to teach a law pertaining to spitting in a place where one prayed or wishes to pray. Rabbi Yirmiyah quoted Rabbi Shmuel bar Halafta, who said, in the name of Rabbi Ada bar Achva, one who prays the Shemona Esrei prayer should not spit until he walks 4 amos from the place he prayed. And Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Avin, says, and so too, one who spits should not pray until he walks 4 amos from the place he spat. And a similar ruling is going to be with regards to urination. Now, we're going to get into the reasonings behind these rulings. Okay, it's coming up, but Shulchan Aruch in 151.9 is saying that it is disrespectful to leave a repulsive gob of saliva visible on the floor of the synagogue, and therefore one must rub it away with his foot. And I want to point out something else, that in the Mishnah Beur 151.25, it says that if the spittle lands on absorbent material like straw or sand, one does not need to rub it away and can leave it where it lies. Now, the question is going to be whether one may spit in a synagogue, and that's going to be a dispute not only in the Yerushalmi, but also in the Bavli. In the Gemara over there, in the Bavli, you can find that in 62b, Berechot 62b. Gemara there is going to rule in accordance with Rava, who holds, like Rabbi Yonah here, that a person is permitted to spit in the synagogue, provided he rubs it away with the foot. So you have different rabbis arguing about this in the Yerushalmi, and Rabbi Yonah here is going to be taking the opinion of Rava in the Bavli. Okay, just something of note. So the Gemara is going to talk about urination now. So Gemara says that it was taught in a brisa, one who prays should not urinate until he walks 4 amos from the place he prayed, and so too one who urinates should not pray until he walks 4 amos from the place he urinated. So what's going on over here is that this brisa is going to be also, very similar in the Bavli, and it's also going to be explained in a very similar way to the Bavli. It's going to basically be like a parallel, both here and there. Okay, this is not really disagreeing, and the Gemara is going to now elaborate on the rulings. But again, we're going to be talking about different rabbis here from what the Bavli is talking about. So Rabbi Yaakov Bar Acha says it is not essential that he actually walk 4 amos away. Rather, even if he simply waits in place for as long as it takes to walk 4 amos, that will be enough. In other words, what's happening here is that Rabbi Yaakov Bar Acha is telling us that when the Baraisa and Rabbi Yirmiyah speaks of walking 4 amos, they're not talking about that they have to, the distance, that they have to, place themselves. Rather, it means that one would wait the amount of time that it would take to walk 4 amos. In other words, it's not being used as a physical movement, but rather that amount of time that you would have to walk away, that's going to be the amount of time you can still stand there. In other words, that the person is going to be allowed to pray in the place where he spat. However, before praying, he must delay for as long as it takes to walk 4 amos. That's going to be the idea. Now, why would there be a case here of urination? So this is not talking about normal kinds of urination. When you have somebody who has a damaged organ, one of the laws in the Torah with the damaged organ is that that person's not allowed to marry into Am Yisrael. But one of the signs of a damaged organ is that you'll see little droplets of urine on the person's shoe. That's a sugya in both shases. So that what this is talking about here, this is not talking about somebody who goes to the bathroom. This is talking about somebody who has a damaged member. And for older people, they can also get incontinent too. That's also a medical thing. But it's probably more likely it's talking about somebody who has a damaged member. And then what happens is that person, they can't marry a woman who's Jewish, but they're still required to pray. So how would that work? So this can be This is not can be. This actually is involuntary. It's actually has to, I'm sure, be extremely embarrassing for the person. But today for older people they'll use diapers. But again, it's not really familiar for us to have this case about somebody with a damaged organ. I imagine that in combat or something like that, that you can get all sorts of horrible injuries, and it could be from something like that, from being in combat, having been in combat, and that when you have a damaged organ, a lot of that muscle tissue will be removed because it's a partially cut off organ, and so you don't have the control. So you'll have like involuntary urination. So that's going to be kind of what it's talking about here, and it's a sad case. I mean, this person can't get married into Am Yisrael. The Gemara is going to talk about these rulings, but he's still required to pray. So Rabbi Yaakov Bar Acha says it is not essential that he actually walks 4 amos away. Rather, even if he simply waits in place for as long as it takes to walk 4 amos, that is sufficient. And the Gemara is going to argue in favor of this explanation. It says that Rabbi Ami said, if you will say it is forbidden to pray after spitting or urinating until one actually walks 4 amos away from the spot, I will say in response regarding any potential site for prayer that perhaps another person came to this place previously and urinated or spat there, says the Gemara. In other words, what this is saying is that something that's going to be like parallel, over in the Bavli and Megillah, right? So, initially the Gemara is going to be talking about the rulings to be saying that one should not pray in place that was used for where there's droplets of urination or spitting, even if the urine doesn't remain there anymore, and that one should not urinate or spit in a place that was used for prayer. That's obvious, right? So we're talking about a case where you have involuntary urine, where there's droplets. Rabbi Ami argues that if this is so, one would be forbidden to pray almost anywhere, for we assume that almost any site was used at some point over hundreds of years for urination or spitting. Similarly, by this reasoning, a traveler would be forbidden to urinate or spit anywhere along the way, for we may assume that every 4 amos section of a well-traveled path will at some point be used for prayer. So the Gemara here is realizing that the issue is not the place in which they prayed or in which there was urination or spit, but rather the amount of time that elapses for these activities. In other words, one who urinates or spit must allow enough time to walk 4 amos before praying, and vice versa. And we're going to get into why that amount of time would be a necessity. Gemara is going to get into talking about the prohibition of reciting words of Torah or prayer within 4 amos of urine or excrement, and the Gemara is going to give the conditions why this prohibition applies. Rabbi Abba said in the name of Rav, in the case of excrement, the prohibition applies until it becomes as dry as bone. And in the case of urine, even if the liquid is absorbed into the ground, the prohibition applies as long as it is able to moisten other items which comes into contact with it. Now, why would it be about becoming dry as bone? And Sadeh Yeshua says that once excrement dries out, it is no longer repulsive. And the Rosh Cirilio says that the term dry of bone implies that the excrement is hardened and is not yet degraded enough that it will crumble. And as we see, others maintain that the excrement must have degraded enough that it is no longer merely hard, but actually crumbles into dust when moved. And otherwise, one may not pray within 4 amos of it. So that why would it be about the urine I want to point out that this is going to be a dispute between the Tanaim, and you can find that in the Bavli 25a in Berechot, and that's going to talk about whether the urine must be able to moisten these items enough that they themselves can then moisten other items which comes into contact with it. Okay, according to the Rosh, we follow the first view, and according to the Rambam, we follow the second view. So the Gemara now is going to talk about the one who disputes, one who is going to talk about this. So Geniva said, this is in the Bavli. Geniva says this in the name of Rav, but here it just says Geniva said. So Geniva said, in the case of urine, so that's literally water, what's written there, the prohibition applies as long as its mark can be discerned on the ground, and even if there is not sufficient moisture to moisten other items with it where it comes into contact. Now, the Gemara is going to talk about the two who dispute Rabbi Abba with regards to the law of excrement. And it says that Shmuel said, in the case of excrement, the prohibition applies only until its surface becomes crusted. And likewise, Shimon Bar Va says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, in the case of excrement, until the surface became crusted. So Pnei Moshe says about this that Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan take a more lenient view than Rav, and they hold that the excrement need not be entirely dried out. Rather, once its outer surface becomes dry and crusted over, one may recite the words of Torah and prayer in the vicinity, even if it still has some moisture there. So that's a dispute there. Rabbi Abba quoted Rav as saying that the prohibition to pray near the excrement applies until the excrement is as dry as bone. The Gemara is going to cite others who quote Rav differently. And Rabbi Yerushalmi says in the name of Rabbi Zera, who says in the name of Rav, in the case of excrement, even if it becomes dry as bone, it is forbidden to recite words of prayer or Torah within 4 amos. So the Gemara is going to cite two who dispute the teaching, and Shmuel says the prohibition applies only until its surface has become crusted. And likewise, Shimon Bar Va says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, in the case of excrement, until its surface becomes crusted. In other words, in this version of the dispute, Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan take the more lenient view than Rav. They hold that not only does the excrement need to not be dry enough to crumble when moved, but it need not be dried out altogether. Even if it has some moisture, one can pray within the 4 amos of it, as long as the surfaces have crusted over. The Gemara questions Rabbi Abba's version of Rav's ruling, and Hiskia says, Rabbi Abba treated urine more stringently than excrement, but urine should not be treated more stringently than excrement. That's going to be a question. In other words, what's being reasoned here is that Hiskia characterized Rabbi Abba's ruling as a stringency of urine over excrement and objects to this stringency. Okay, so the Gemara is going to understand Hiskia to be saying that Rabbi Abba treats urine too stringently, and he's going to respond accordingly. Rabbi Mana says to Hiskia, but from the statement of Geniva, who rules that urine is prohibited as long as its mark can be discerned, we see that others rule even more stringently in this matter than Rabbi Abba. So why do you characterize Rabbi Abba's ruling regarding urine as too stringent? And Hiskia explains. He said to Rabbi Mana, my objection is not that Rabbi Abba's ruling concerning urine is too stringent, but that his ruling concerning excrement is too lenient. For I have maintained that even if excrement became dry as bone, it is prohibited to pray in its 4 amos because its substance still exists. And in the case of absorbed urine, however, its substance no longer exists and as a separate and distinct entity. And therefore, basically the point is that, even if it retains sufficient moisture to moisten other items, which where it comes in contact with it, would be permitted to recite the words of Torah in the 4 Amos. Now, this is a complicated view. Many times, Hiskia, who will be the Rosh Yeshiva of the yeshiva in Sipori, he will be taking the view of Rav, and many times Rabbi Mana will be taking the view of Shmuel. Now, I want to point out that Hiskia did appoint Rabbi Mana to be his successor when Hiskia retired. So there's usually that's going to be the tension that happens when there's a direct argument between this case. Okay, it'll usually be where you have a disagreement between Hiskia and Rabbi Mana and Yerushalmi. Usually it's going to be Hiskia taking the view of Rav and Rabbi Mana taking the view of Shmuel. So in this reply, okay, I want to point out that Hiskia is going to clarify that position, and he does. And he does not mean to say that there should be a single law for dried out excrement and absorbent urine. Rather, what he's doing is he's objecting to Rabbi Abba's ruling concerning the excrement, which he regards as being too lenient. And in Hiskia's view, the excrement should be treated with more stringency than the urine. I want to point out that there's going to be some other interpretations for this exchange between Rabbi Mana and Hiskia over here. And I want to point out to the Pnei Moshe. Okay, Pnei Moshe is saying about this interpretation, his interpretation of what's going on here. Is he saying that Rabbi Mana is unsure whether Hiskia's question is directed at Rabbi Abba or Geneva, and he argues that either way, neither treats urine more stringently than excrement, and Hiskia replies that the chief factor in determining whether prayer should be permitted or prohibited is whether the substance of the excrement or urine still exists, and by that measure, Rabbi Abba treats urine more stringently than excrement, for he prohibits prayer in the case of absorbed urine, even though the substance is no longer extant, but prohibits it in the case of dried excrement, even though the substance is still extant. Now, I want to point out something from the Vilna Goan, and Vilna Goan is going to explain it like this. He says that to Hiskia, he understands Rabbi Abba to be following Rabbi Zera's view regarding excrement, and that it is forbidden only as long as its substance remains extant. In other words, it's still there. And urine, however, remains forbidden even after that substance is no longer extant. And this is where we find that urine is going to be treated more stringently than excrement. That's going to be the note by the Vilna Gaon. And he has another note where he's going to actually amend the Gemara here in a way that Hiskia's question is actually going to be directed at Rabbi Yirmiyah, who rules that dried excrement is forbidden. And modified this way, Hiskia is going to, or amended this way, Hiskia is going to inquire as to his view concerning urine. In other words, he's going to basically be asking, does Rabbi Yirmiyah follow the view of Geneva, in which case urine is going to be forbidden even after it dries, and as long as its mark remains, or does he treat urine more leniently, in which case it is forbidden only as long as it retains enough moisture to moisten others? That's the question. Rabbi Yirmiyah replies that he does not follow the view of Geneva, and thus the dried up urine is permitted since its substance is no longer extant, and the dried up excrement, however, is going to be forbidden since that substance is still extant. And this is really why we need the Meforshim to help us to understand this. And this is why we really need the Rishonim who can go through all of this and help codify it, because it's very hard for simple people like you and me to pull out halacha from the Yerushalmi and from these very complicated texts, because they're they're written in shorthand, and these people are spending years even on a single page. There's a story about just chapter 7, of Shabbat, Masechet Shabbos, where Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish just studied that chapter for 3.5 years. So, you can see the level of detail from just two of these Amorim. And we don't have the civilization or culture or attention span today to be like that. I wish we could, but we don't. But that's why, we're at a much diminished level and capacity than these people, than our grandfathers were. These Amorim, they were amazing, and that's why we need the Amorim and the Rishonim to clarify this for us, because we can't sit down and study just chapter 7 of Shabbat for 3.5 years. It's just nobody's made like that today. But what we are made of is something where we can open the Shulchan Aruch and we can look at what it is, and then that's why we have to follow. It's really important to follow the sages. Really important to follow your rabbis. Have a great day.